Hi, I'm Elliot Shapiro with EMS Communications. For the last 20 years, we've been on a mission to rid the world of boring presentations one speaker at a time. We do this through workshops and coaching, helping individuals and teams improve their leadership, presentation, and communication skills. Participants walk away right away with tools they can use to increase their levels of confidence and conviction when delivering any kind of information. In this video, you're going to learn tips and tricks and techniques that are going to help you. But be warned, these fundamentals may sound simple, but actually putting them into action consistently during every conversation over multiple days, that takes focus and practice. Let's take a look at the 8 fundamentals of conference communication. Let's begin by talking about eye connection. We're all familiar with the phrase eye contact because that's what we've heard our entire lives, that you have to make eye contact with someone that you're speaking to. But eye contact implies a touch, a quick touch to one person, to this person, to that person. And what happens is you end up looking too scattered or uncomfortable. But your goal is connecting with each person you engage. How do you do that effectively? You want to connect with each listener or listeners in a group individually for a complete thought. Even when one person asks you a question in the group, you need to respond to everyone. And you answer while sharing eye connection with each person. But the question often comes up, how long should you look at someone? You don't want to make it too long or too short. So how long? It depends. Not too long and not too short. The best way to think about it is using punctuation, specifically commas and periods. Think about your mental script. And as you go through your mental script, anytime there's a comma or there's a period, that's the end of a thought. And that's when you move on to the next person for another thought, and another thought over here, and another thought over here. If it feels like staring, chances are you're getting it right. When you are using display panels, you have to be careful not to stare at them. What you do is you use that display panel as a pause to gather your thoughts. You look at it, you pause, decide what you're going to say, and then you re-engage with your listener, making that eye-to-eye connection. Now at the booth, you have to be careful because when you're engaged in conversation, you know what's going to happen is you'll see other people on the periphery. You have to avoid looking past this person to see who else might be walking by the booth at the moment. Imagine how that feels when you're darting away and you're darting away. What does that imply to this person? That maybe another delegate walking past is more important than he or she is. Be aware of your eye connection. Look your listeners right in the eye to convey honesty, sincerity, and confidence. Our next fundamental, gestures. Meaning, what do you do with your hands? As humans, we gesture naturally, all the time when we're not thinking about it, in meetings, in conversations, even on phone calls. But when you're the center of attention, when you're under pressure, it's hard to know what to do with your hands. So why should you move them? Not only because people like to see your hands moving, but because when you gesture, there's an impact on your voice. Every time you move your hand, your voice is going to get louder. There will be more variety. Make sure your gestures feel a little bit exaggerated. You'll always have to overdo things just a little bit to get it right. When you gesture, it won't only be a benefit to this particular listener. Others walking by are going to see you engaged in conversation. The conversation will look more interesting, and they may become interested in going in to see what you're talking about. What else can you do with your hands? Well, you're going to have display screens. Point to the display screens using a full hand. When you gesture to the screen, don't point. Avoid pointing because you may end up pointing back at your listener, which is something most people don't like. What else? Well, the hands are a giveaway to nervousness, so be careful of rubbing too much. And of course, be careful of giving the wrong impression by putting your hands on your hips or crossing your arms. This may make you look closed off or give some other kind of wrong perception. Be aware of your hands. Practice using your gestures every day, all the time between now and your next Congress. Now it's time to talk about movement and posture. We all understand. There's good movement, and then there's distracting movement. Good movement might be walking over to greet someone, escorting them from the aisle into your booth, or giving them a tour around the area. But it's not just movement. People even notice your posture and the way you stand. And as a result, they make inferences about you. So you have to be careful of that nervous energy, which might lead you to swaying from side to side, rocking forward and backwards. When you do that and it's overdone, it makes you look nervous or restless or uncomfortable, and after a while it might even get them seasick. All that is when you do that is nervous energy that's leaking out through your legs. What do you need to do? Stand up straight. Balance yourself evenly over both of those feet. Plant your feet in place. When you do it, all that nervous energy is still bottled up inside, but now it has to find a different way to get out. Well, what happens is it's like hot air. It rises. And you can take that nervous energy and channel it into gestures and facial expression. Now, of course, you want to avoid slouching or just leaning on one hip for an extended period of time. What typically happens is after a while that hip goes numb and you end up bringing it to the other side. And that's not the way you want to come across. So what do you need to do? Stand up straight. Plant your feet and use that nervous energy to your advantage. Now let's move on to talking about speaking pace and pausing. Have you ever been told that you speak too quickly? Well, the good news is there's nothing wrong with it by itself. Why? Well, when you speak quickly, it means you've got a lot of energy and you know your content well and you want to get it out there. But the problem is that you know much more about your content than your listener does. So you have to make sure that you speak at a pace that they're able to follow. A slower pace is going to help them take in and retain your information much more easily. Now, if you do typically speak quickly, you might need to force yourself to feel as if you're speaking at a far slower pace than you normally would. That's one solution. A better solution, though, is to maintain your natural pace, but pause longer and pause more often. Don't slow down, pause more. And when you pause, there are two benefits, two great reasons for pausing. One is for your listener and the other is for you. For your listener, when you pause, it gives them time to process what you just said, to make sure that they understand the words that they heard. The other benefit, though, is for you. While they're thinking about what you just said, it's the perfect opportunity for you to think about what you're going to say next. It's a win-win. When you pause, it tells your listeners that was important. Think about that. Now at the booth, you're going to have to exaggerate your pauses. Make them feel way too long. Again, especially with international attendees who might need a few seconds of silence to process what you just said. Now, like any conference, you understand. Over multiple days, you're having the same conversation over and over and over. And after a while, you get so comfortable that you just race through the content to be able to move on to the next conversation. Be careful. Force yourself to pause. They may feel dramatic to you, but they're going to help your listener get, understand, and retain your content. We just talked about pausing and how important pauses are to help your listener understand your information. But as communicators, many people are uncomfortable with that silence in conversation. So what do? They take that silence and they fill it up with noise. And that's where non-words come in. You want to work on eliminating non-words. Some examples, you know, like, or even, right? Using too many of these filler words makes you as a speaker seem unprepared, or worse yet, that you don't know what you're talking about. Too many ums and uhs and you knows, it takes away from your credibility. It's distracting. So why do people use non-words? Again, because we're uncomfortable with that silence. So what we do is we take that silence and we fill it up with noise. So you have to become aware of your non-words. And once you become aware of them, it's easier for you to replace them with a pause. You just have to understand your pattern. We work with this during our training sessions with clients. And we use a snapping exercise. We'll snap our fingers every time our clients use a non-word. You know, try it. Try it yourself, maybe with your friends or your family or your colleagues at the office. In your next meeting, say we're going to take 10 minutes and everybody's going to snap for non-words. You'll start to notice them. You'll start to catch yourself. Now, it's important to remember, you're human. And as humans, yes, we use non-words. A few is natural. Too many is a distraction. So if in a 10-minute conversation you use 3 non-words, nobody's going to notice. But when there's a pattern, every time you pause, for the next thought, there's a potential distraction. To make sure that you're sounding confident, that you're demonstrating your expertise, be aware of your non-words and insert the pauses in their place. Our next fundamental, facial expression. What you need to do with your facial expression is use a variety rather than appearing over serious or maybe just disinterested. When you do it, it helps make the conversation seem more engaging to whoever you're speaking with. When you use a variety of facial expression, it brings feeling to your message. So how do you do it effectively? Well, yes, it means you have to smile every once in a while. Maybe it means you have to raise your eyebrows up or open your eyes wide or maybe scrunch your face up just a little bit. You might have to feel like you're overdoing it, but it's never as much as you think. And when you do it, you'll find that it brings vocal variety. It brings more variety to your voice, and it's going to cause you to gesture even more naturally. Facial expression is especially important when you are the center of attention. Usually in that setting, because you want to be taken seriously, your default expression is a serious one. So in that moment, you're going to want to engage your listeners by exaggerating your expression more than you usually would. Plus, as we talked about earlier, other delegates watching you from outside the booth will see you looking more engaged in that conversation. They'll want to come in and learn what you're talking about. So use a wide variety of facial expression. I guarantee it's never going to look as exaggerated as it's going to feel to you. Now let's talk about energy, your energy level. Whether it's used to speak with enthusiasm on a topic or to deliver a tough message with conviction, energy helps you sell yourself and your ideas. When we talk about energy, we mean vocal variety, changing your pitch, changing your tone, letting your voice go up high and coming down low, sometimes getting loud or other times getting soft. Energy is a great way to take your information and make it sound that much more interesting. When you're energetic, it encourages your listeners to pay even more attention to your words. Now here's the thing. To convey just the right amount of energy, you'll need to feel as if you're overdoing it. It's especially important later in the day or when you're coming to the last day of the conference. You have to force yourself to overdo the energy. It's also important to understand that energy, it's a great mask. When you bring energy, it helps cover up other physical distractions that might become less distracting because of the energy level. And trust yourself. You're never actually going to allow yourself to overdo the energy level. You won't. And once you understand that, all you need to do is feel as if you're overdoing the energy every single time. Energy sells. Energy is a great tool for connecting with your listeners. Our next topic, speaking with confidence. To this point, we've discussed body language and the impact that that has on confidence. But now let's talk about a few other tendencies, verbal and vocal tendencies that have the potential to distract your listeners and make you seem unsure or lacking confidence. The first is the overuse of personal pronouns, specifically the words I and me and my. You need to use listener-focused language, not me-focused language. And here's an example. Listen to how this sounds. I'm glad to have a few minutes of your time. First, I have a few questions I'd like to ask. Then I'll give you a tour of our booth. Then I'd like to share some details about my company. And finally, I'll show you some information which I know will be of interest. That was focused on me. Imagine the impact when you focus more on them. Consider something along these lines. Thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time. After we get a bit of information about you and your business, you'll get a tour of the booth. And then you'll have the opportunity to learn specifics about our products and the research that our team conducts. Sounds different, doesn't it? Listener-focused language. Now let's talk about two other vocal tendencies. The first one we refer to as upspeak. And I'll just have to demonstrate it for you. Upspeak is this tendency that speakers have where their voice goes up at the end of a phrase or at the end of a sentence. It makes the speaker sound tentative or unsure. And for the listener, it's hard to pick out critical information because it all sounds the same. How do you get rid of upspeak? End on a down note. Sound emphatic. Take your content and make it sound important. The other tendency is when people trail off at the end of sentences. Imagine how that sounds if you're sharing some information, but the last few words is hard for them to hear. It's almost like saying, this last part is really not all that important. Well, this is especially important if you have notes in front of you or if you have a display screen behind you. What typically happens is when the person looks down at their notes, their voice goes down with it, and they end up trailing off. Or when you glance at your display screen, and the last few words are lost. Again, that content is critical. You just have to make sure that it sounds that way. To avoid trailing off, practice emphasizing the last word of every phrase. Or at the end of each sentence, you just get a little bit louder. Just like all these skills, it's going to feel overdone. But it will get attention and it will keep your listeners' attention. Speak with confidence every single time.